Your pain was never meant to blind you. It was meant to build you. See, sometimes the very thing that hurt you was also the thing that had to happen to shape you. Pain doesn't just visit without purpose. It's a teacher in disguise. You may not have understood it when it broke you, but now, looking back, you can see that the breaking wasn't the end. It was the beginning of becoming. Because if you never bled, you wouldn't have learned how to heal. If you never cried, you wouldn't have learned how to pray. If you never fell, you wouldn't have known how to get back up. God never wastes pain. Every scar carries strategy, every tear carries transformation, and every season of suffering carries a seed that, when nurtured, grows into strength. But here's the thing about pain, it loves to disguise itself as a permanent condition. It tries to blind you, convince you it'll always be where you are, that you'll never see beyond the moment that wounded you. It whispers lies that say, you're not enough, you're too broken, you've gone too far. But that's not the truth. The truth is God saw that pain before it ever touched you. He allowed it not to destroy you, but to develop you. The storm you went through wasn't to make you drown. It was to teach you how to walk on water. The pain wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Because before God promotes you, He processes you. Sometimes God will let the things that made you comfortable fall apart. Not because He's cruel, but because He's calling you higher. And to build you, He has to break off everything that can't carry the weight of where He's taking you. See, you can't bring your old mindset into a new miracle. You can't carry the pain of rejection into the place of purpose. If He's going to trust you with vision, He has to make sure you can see beyond what tried to blind you. And the only way to see clearly is to heal deeply. Healing doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means learning to look at it differently. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start declaring, this happened for me. When you realize that your pain was actually part of God's construction plan, everything changes. You begin to see that the people who left weren't losses, they were lessons. The betrayal wasn't meant to destroy you. It revealed the strength of what's inside you. You start to understand that it had to hurt because if it didn't, you wouldn't have grown. God will sometimes let your heart break just so He can rebuild it stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. The version of you that He's raising can't be built on comfort. It has to be forged through pressure, through seasons that feel unfair, but are actually divine. Don't let the pain blind you, because when you focus too long on what broke you, you stop seeing what's being birthed in you. Pain can blur your vision if you let it, but when you start to view it through the lens of purpose, it becomes power. That's why the enemy wants you stuck in your past. He knows that if you ever see the purpose in your pain, you'll start walking differently. You'll talk differently. You'll stop settling for what you've outgrown. You'll start protecting your peace, guarding your faith, and walking boldly into rooms you once felt unworthy to enter. Maybe life has hit you hard. Maybe you've cried yourself to sleep more nights than you can count. Maybe you've prayed for healing but woke up still feeling broken. But even in that, God has been building something. You didn't realize it, but while you were breaking, He was building your resilience. While you were crying, He was cleansing your heart. While you were hurting, He was hollowing out space for His glory to rest. You've been in the workshop of grace, being molded by the potter's hands. And sometimes the process doesn't feel holy, it feels heavy. But holiness is hidden in the heavy. The pain you've been carrying is proof that you've been trusted with purpose. You've got to stop seeing your pain as punishment and start seeing it as preparation. The same God who allowed you to go through the fire is the same God who's going to bring you out refined. He's going to make sure that when you step into your next season, you're not walking in wounded, you're walking in wisdom. Because now you know what it means to survive. You know what it means to depend on God when everything else falls apart. You know how to pray when words don't come easy. You've learned to worship in the dark. And that's what builds you. Every moment that tried to blind you with bitterness can be turned into a testimony of breakthrough. You can choose to see pain as your prison or your platform. You can let it paralyze you, or you can let it propel you. You can keep replaying the story that hurt you, or you can rewrite it with God as the author. When you surrender your pain to Him, He turns your wounds into wisdom. He gives beauty for ashes, strength for sorrow, and peace for what once caused you panic. That's who He is. He doesn't just heal you, He rebuilds you better. You're not behind, you're being built. And when the construction feels messy, don't walk away. God is still working. The things that once blinded you will soon become the very lenses through which you see His glory. You'll realize that the darkness didn't destroy you. It developed your discernment. The loss didn't limit you. It taught you how to let go. And the heartbreak didn't halt your purpose. It humbled you enough to handle it. So, wipe your eyes. Lift your head. You've been through too much to stay broken. The pain that was meant to blind you has actually positioned you. You're standing on the very pieces that once shattered you. You've been built by the breaking, strengthened by the suffering, and purified by the pressure. You are proof that pain doesn't get the final say, purpose does. And if you can just keep walking, keep trusting, keep believing, you'll see that everything that hurt you was actually helping you. God didn't let it happen to break your vision. He let it happen to sharpen your focus. Because your pain was never meant to blind you. It was meant to build you. The vision God gave you still stands even when your confidence falls. Sometimes life hits in ways that make you question if you ever really heard God in the first place. You start replaying the promise, trying to figure out if maybe you imagined it. Maybe you made it up. Maybe you got it wrong. Because the vision looked clear when God gave it, but now the path looks confusing, the steps look heavy, and your strength feels small. You thought obedience would equal ease, but what you found was that obedience often invites opposition. And that's where your confidence starts to shake. You still believe God, but you don't believe in you anymore. You know He can do it, but you're not sure if He can still do it through you. But here's what you need to remember. The vision didn't come from your confidence. It came from God's covenant. He didn't give it to you because you had it all together. He gave it to you because He knew that somewhere inside you was the courage to carry what others would have dropped. The enemy wants to convince you you're doubting the dream is dead. But baby, the dream is still alive. It's just waiting for you to remember who sent it. God's word doesn't crumble just because your emotions do. His plans don't expire just because you got tired. The vision still stands even when you don't feel strong enough to stand with it. There are moments when your confidence will fall so low that even your faith feels silent. You'll look at your progress and feel like you're moving backwards. You'll pray and hear nothing. You'll sow and see no harvest. And in those moments, the temptation is to think that the vision is failing. But visions don't fail. They mature. God gives a vision in seed form. It starts small, quiet, hidden beneath the soil of uncertainty. You can't see it growing, but it's growing. And while you're fighting to believe, heaven is still working on what He promised. When God showed you that vision, He didn't just see your potential. He saw your process. He saw the days when you'd be confident and the days when you'd question everything. He saw the nights you'd cry yourself to sleep and still wake up the next morning with faith the size of a mustard seed. And He said, that's enough. Because God doesn't need your perfection. He just needs your persistence. You don't have to be confident all the time to walk in His calling. Sometimes trembling obedience is still powerful obedience. Sometimes moving with tea in your eyes is still victory. Your confidence might fall, but His word will not. Your emotions might shift, but His promise is steady. God knew your weaknesses before He gave you the vision, and He gave it to you anyway. That means your insecurities were already factored into His plan. The delays, the doubts, the detours, all of it was seen, all of it was covered, and none of it can cancel what He decreed. You can lose courage for a season, but you can't lose what's been sealed in heaven. Sometimes God will let your confidence fall just to show you that the vision was never about your ability. It was always about His authority. You thought you were the builder, but He's the architect. You thought you had to hold it all together, but He's the one holding you. That's why the vision still stands even when your confidence doesn't. Because God's word doesn't lean on your emotions, it leans on His eternal promise. What He started, He's obligated to finish. What He spoke, He's faithful to perform. Think about Joseph. God gave him a dream, but the dream didn't come with a manual. It came with betrayal, false accusations, and a prison sentence. Everything around him contradicted what God said. His confidence could have fallen, but the vision didn't. Because God wasn't building a dreamer. He was building a deliverer. The same is true for you. God isn't just trying to fulfill the vision. He's using the process to strengthen the vessel. The vision is not just about what you'll do. It's about who you're becoming while you do it. There will be days you want to walk away. Days when the vision feels too heavy and your faith feels too thin. But even then, God is still standing over His word, watching it perform exactly as He planned. He's not intimidated by your wariness. He's not disappointed by your doubt. He just wants you to keep showing up even if all you have left is a whisper of belief. Because the vision doesn't need your full strength to survive. It just needs your agreement to keep walking. So even when your confidence falls, keep your eyes on the vision. You may have lost momentum, but you haven't lost purpose. You may have lost people, but you haven't lost the promise. What God spoke is still echoing in the spirit, waiting for your faith to catch up again. Don't let temporary discouragement make you tear down what God is still building. Don't measure divine progress with human perception. The vision might look delayed, but it's not denied. It might look silent, but it's still speaking. It's just growing in the dark, like seeds do. You may be standing in a place that doesn't look anything like what God showed you, but hold on. Every great story has a chapter where it looks like nothing's working. Every miracle has a moment when it feels like God is late. But then some God who spoke the vision begins to breathe life back into it. Suddenly, you'll see why the waiting mattered. Suddenly, the pieces start aligning. And suddenly, your confidence will rise again, not because you've regained control, but because you've realized you were never meant to carry it alone. So don't give up on the vision just because your confidence fell. God hasn't changed his mind about you. The vision still stands, waiting for you to remember that even when you fall, his promise still holds. You can't heal while replaying what God already released you from. There comes a time when you have to decide that the rerun of your pain no longer deserves airtime in your mind. You can't keep pressing play on what God has already deleted from his records. The enemy loves to trap you in the loop of what was, what they said, what you lost, what you did, what you regret. He knows that as long as you're replaying the past, you'll never receive the peace that's waiting for you in the present. Healing isn't just about recovering from what happened. It's about refusing to keep reliving it. There's a reason God calls himself the healer. When he heals, he doesn't patch you up, he makes you whole. But you can't walk in wholeness if you keep picking at the wounds he's trying to close. You keep talking about who hurt you, and God is saying, I already handled that. You keep replaying that failure, and God is saying, I already forgave that. You keep revisiting the old version of you, and God is saying, I've already redeemed you. Every time you hit replay, you're stepping out of healing and back into history. And history can't heal you. It can only haunt you. Some of us are bleeding internally from memories we won't let die. We've built altars to moments that broke us. We've decorated our prisons and called them protection. We think that replaying the pain keeps us safe from being hurt again. But in truth, it keeps us chained to what God already freed us from. You can't receive a new beginning if you're still trying to edit the old ending. Healing begins when you stop rehearsing the story of your suffering and start retelling the story of God's survival in you. When God releases you from something, it means he's already settled it in heaven. He's already decided that what happened no longer has authority over you. But healing on earth requires agreement with what God already did in eternity. You have to stop siding with your trauma and start standing with your testimony. Yes, they betrayed you. Yes, you made mistakes. Yes, it was unfair. But none of that disqualifies you from God's plan. The longer you keep looking back, the longer it takes for you to see what's ahead. There's a difference between remembering and reliving. Remembering is reflection, reliving is resurrection. When you remember, you look back to learn. When you relive, you look back to stay. Some of you are trying to heal while still living in the same mental neighborhood where the pain happened. You keep revisiting the moment like you can change it, but you can't. Healing happens when you realize that you can't rewrite the past, but you can release its power. You don't need closure from people when you already have confirmation from God. Every time you replay that moment, you're giving new life. You're giving energy to what's supposed to be buried. And the more you feed it, the more it grows. That's why the past feels so loud. It's not because it's powerful. It's because you keep turning up the volume. Silence it. Starve it. Stop giving your mind permission to dwell in places your spirit has already outgrown. The pain can't heal while you're feeding it attention. Healing begins when you take your hands off the replay button and let God write something new. You can't expect to see your future clearly while your heart is still fogged by what happened yesterday. That's why God sometimes closes doors so tightly. It's his way of protecting your healing. He's saying, stop looking there. I'm not there anymore. God doesn't heal you just to make you feel better. He heals you to move you forward. But you can't move forward if you keep dragging your old pain like luggage into every new place. You've got to put it down. You've got to tell yourself that season doesn't own me anymore. Sometimes, the hardest part of healing isn't letting go of the pain. It's letting go of the version of yourself that was shaped by it. You got used to being the one who was hurt, the one who was overlooked, the one who had to fight alone. But God is calling you to outgrow that identity. He's saying, you don't have to be the victim anymore. You don't have to carry that weight anymore. You can walk free. But you can't walk free while you're still living in the story that kept you bound. Healing doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It means deciding that it will no longer control your peace. It means forgiving so you can breathe again. It means trusting that even the things that broke you had purpose. You don't have to replay it to understand it. Sometimes you just have to release it to redeem it. God can do more with your surrender than you can do with your memory. So stop rehearsing what God already released. Stop letting the enemy use your past as evidence against your future. Every time he reminds you of who you were, remind him of who you are becoming. You're not that person anymore. You're healed. You're growing. You're covered by grace. And no matter what the past tries to say, God's word over your life is louder. You can't heal while replaying what hurt you. But when you finally let go, when you finally trust that God has already dealt with it, you'll find peace in places you didn't think peace could exist. The memories may still come, but they won't control you. The pain may whisper, but it won't defy you, because you'll know deep down that healing has already happened. You just had to stop pressing play on what God already pressed stop on. Focus births faith, and faith unlocks what fear tried to forfeit. The moment you decide to fix your eyes on what God said instead of what life looks like, something starts to shift inside of you. Focus has a way of silencing chaos. It doesn't erase the noise, but it teaches you to tune into a different frequency, heaven's frequency. Because when you focus on God's promise, you stop magnifying your problem. When you shift your attention from what's uncertain to who is unchanging, faith starts to rise again. Fear thrives in distraction. It feeds on your divided attention. It sneaks in through the cracks of your focus, whispering lies that sound logical but aren't spiritual. It tells you that it's too late, too hard, too much. But focus says, God said it, and that settles it. When your focus is fixed on the one who never fails, fear loses its grip. You can't nurture fear and faith at the same time. One will always starve while the other grows. That's why the enemy keeps throwing distractions your way. He doesn't need to destroy you. He just needs to divide your focus. Because a distracted believer is a defeated believer. The truth is, whatever you focus on longest becomes the strongest. If you focus on the pain grows. If you focus on the past keeps pulling you back. But if you focus on the vision, faith starts to build momentum. That's what God meant when he said, walk by faith, not by sight. Because sight will always show you what's visible, but focus reveals what's possible. You've got to learn to lock your eyes on what God promised even when everything around you seems to contradict it. Faith doesn't grow in comfort, it grows in clarity. And clarity comes from focus. Sometimes you've got to refocus after the fall. Life will knock you off balance, and before you know it, you're focused on everything that went wrong instead of what God is still doing right. But faith doesn't come from seeing the outcome. It comes from seeing the one who holds the outcome. You might not know how it's going to work out, but focus reminds you that it's going to. You don't have to know the whole plan. You just need to trust the planner. Focus bursts faith because it shifts your perspective. It takes your attention off your weakness and places it on God's strength. It reminds you that mountains move not because you're mighty, but because he is merciful. When Peter stepped out of the boat, he didn't walk on water because he was fearless. He walked because his focus was on Jesus. But the moment he looked at the wind, the waves, the storm, he began to sink. That's what happens when fear gets your focus. You start to sink in the very thing you were anointed to stand on. But here's the good news. Focus is a choice. You don't have to surrender to fear. You can redirect it anytime. You can wake up, look fear in the face, and say, you don't get my focus today. You can train your spirit to look for God even in the middle of the storm. You can declare that even when you don't see it, he's working. Even when you don't feel it, he's faithful. That's what faith does. It looks past what's visible and sees what's promised. Faith doesn't ignore fear, it overrides it. Faith says, I see the storm, but I also see my Savior. It says, I feel the pain, but I also feel his presence. It says, I don't know how, but I know who. And that kind of faith only comes from focus, from choosing to stare at God's goodness until his word becomes more real than your worry. When you focus long enough, fear starts to lose its authority. You start walking in rooms that once intimidated you. You start dreaming again, hoping again, believing again. Because faith unlocks what fear tried to forfeit. Fear tried to forfeit your calling by convincing you you're not enough. Fear tried to make you forfeit your purpose by making you second guess your worth. But faith shows up and says, God picked me anyway. Faith says, I don't need to be perfect, I just need to be available. Fear says, what if it doesn't work? Faith says, what if it does? And every time you choose faith over fear, heaven responds. Doors open. Strength resettles in. You can't move forward if your focus is fractured. You can't see what God is showing you if you're too busy watching what the enemy is throwing at you. Some of you are praying for faith but feeding your fear. You're listening to the wrong voices, scrolling through the wrong noise, giving energy to things that drain your hope. If you want faith to rise, feed your focus with the word. Remind yourself daily that God's track record is perfect. He's never failed you yet. And if he hasn't failed before, he won't start now. Faith doesn't mean the absence of fear. It means fear no longer makes the decisions. You can still feel afraid and move forward anyway. You can still doubt and keep walking. Because faith isn't about how you feel, it's about where you're focused. When your eyes are on Jesus, fear can't win. The same waves that were meant to drown you become the ground you walk on. The same fire that was meant to burn you becomes the furnace that refines you. So fix your focus. Keep your eyes on the vision God gave you, not the obstacles standing in front of you. You might stumble, you might cry, you might question, but don't lose your focus. Because focus births faith, and faith will take you where fear never could. Every breakthrough, every miracle, every moment of divine favor begins with focus. What you fix your eyes on today will determine what you walk into tomorrow. So stay focused, keep believing. Because the moment you choose faith over fear, heaven starts to move. And what you thought was impossible begins to unfold right before your eyes. When you keep your eyes on God's vision, your past loses its permission to define you. There comes a moment in every believer's life when you have to decide what will hold your focus, the vision or the past. You can't walk into what's ahead of you while you're still staring at what's behind you. The past has a voice, and if you listen to it long enough, it will talk you out of every promise God has prepared for you. It will remind you of what you did wrong, who you used to be, and where you failed. But the moment you set your eyes on what God showed you, the voice of your past begins to lose its power. Because you can't be defined by what you've been through when you're walking in what you're called to. Your past will always try to pull rank. It will say, "You're not qualified. You made too many mistakes. You don't deserve this." But God's vision speaks louder. It says, "I chose you on purpose, with purpose, for purpose." The past only has permission when you give it attention. Every time you revisit what God has already redeemed, you give the past a platform it no longer deserves. But when you fix your eyes on God's vision, you remind your soul that grace outranks guilt. You remind yourself that your story isn't over. It's being rewritten by the one who makes all things new. There's a reason the windshield is bigger than the rearview mirror. Because where you're going is greater than where you've been. God doesn't want you driving your life by constantly checking the mirror of your past. That's how crashes happen. You start looking back more than you look forward, and before you know it, you've lost sight of the road to destiny. The vision that God gave you is meant to pull you out of your history and into your hope. You're not who you were back then. You're who God is shaping you to become. The enemy loves to weaponize your past. He'll remind you of the mistakes you made, the seasons you wasted, and the times you fell short. But every time he brings up your past, it's because he's afraid of your future. He knows that if you ever fully embrace the vision God gave you, there's nothing he can do to stop you. So he tries to anchor you to what no longer exists. But you have to remind him, and yourself, that the blood of Jesus already settled that case. You've been forgiven, restored, and repurposed. What used to define you now refines you. Keeping your eyes on God's vision isn't about pretending the past never happened. It's about refusing to let it hold the pen anymore. You can acknowledge your past without living in it. You can honor what you've learned without letting it limit you. When you focus on God's vision, you start to see your past differently. The pain becomes purpose. The failure becomes fuel. The rejection becomes redirection. Every scar becomes a story of survival. You realize that God didn't erase your past. He redeemed it. And redemption means it no longer defines who you are. It testifies to who He is. There are people who will try to remind you of where you came from because they can't handle where you're going. They'll say, "Don't forget who you used to be." But the truth is, you'll never forget. You'll just refuse to be chained by it. The same God who called you out of that season will sustain you in this one. The same grace that lifted you up when you fell is the grace that's carrying you now. The vision is your compass. The past is just the map of where you started. You don't live there anymore. Sometimes the hardest part of walking into the vision is forgiving yourself for the person you had to be to survive before you saw it. You might look back and see immaturity, bad decisions, or broken moments, but God looks at you and sees progress. He sees how you kept going when you didn't have clarity. He sees how you kept praying when you didn't have strength. He sees how you kept believing even when you didn't understand. That's why He trusts you with the vision, because He knows your past doesn't disqualify you, it developed you. When you keep your eyes on God's vision, you start living from a place of promise instead of pain. You stop asking, "Why did that happen to me?" and start declaring, "That had to happen for me." You start realizing that the past wasn't punishment. It was preparation. God was using every heartbreak, every mistake, every disappointment to strengthen your spirit and sharpen your discernment. You couldn't see it then, but now you know. The pain was the training ground for purpose. Your past will try to remind you of who you were, but God's vision will keep revealing who you are becoming. You can't hold both. You can't build the future with your hands still full of regret. You've got to release the past so you can receive the promise. Because every time you look back, you lose focus on what's ahead. The enemy doesn't need to destroy you. He just needs to distract you. But when your eyes stay fixed on God's vision, you walk with a different kind of confidence. You start to see yourself through His eyes. Chosen, redeemed, unstoppable. And here's the truth: the past doesn't have the power to follow you unless you keep opening the door for it. God already locked it behind you. So stop turning around. Stop letting old versions of yourself speak into this new chapter. You've outgrown who you were. You've stepped into something greater. The vision God gave you is calling you forward, not backward. So keep your eyes on it. Keep believing even when the past tries to whisper that you're not worthy. Keep walking even when shame tries to slow you down. Because as long as your eyes are on God's vision, your past has no permission to define your future. You are not what you've been through. You are what you're becoming. And the moment you fix your focus on that truth, everything that once held you loses its hold. You've walked through pain, you've wrestled with doubt, you've questioned your worth, and you've battled the memories that tried to chain you to who you used to be. But today, God is reminding you that you are not where you were. You are right in the middle of becoming everything He saw when He gave you that vision. Every tear you cried watered the soil of your purpose. Every setback was setting you up for a comeback. Every season of silence was God working behind the scenes, preparing you to carry what you prayed for. You've learned that your pain was never meant to blind you. It was meant to build you. You've seen that the vision God gave you still stands, even when your confidence falls. You've realized you can't heal while replaying what God already released you from. You've discovered that focus bursts faith, and faith unlocks what fear tried to forfeit. And now, you know that when you keep your eyes on God's vision, your past loses its permission to define you. This is your moment to rise, to stop apologizing for who you're becoming, to stop shrinking to fit spaces that can no longer hold your purpose. God is not asking you to have it all figured out. He's asking you to keep your eyes fixed on Him. Because when your vision aligns with His, no past mistake, no fear, no failure, and no devil in hell can stop what He's already started. You are not disqualified. You are destined. You are not broken. You are being built. You are not forgotten. You are being formed. And even if your journey has been messy, even if you've stumbled along the way, God still intends to use all of it. The same God who turned your mourning into movement is turning your pain into power. So lift your head, straighten your shoulders, walk like someone who knows they've been chosen. Keep your eyes on that vision, the one God whispered when no one else believed in you. Because that vision is heaven's blueprint for your life, and every step you take in faith brings you closer to the fulfillment of that promise. Don't let your past speak louder than your purpose. Don't let fear drown out the sound of God's calling. You are not behind. You are not late. You are right on time for what God is about to do next. And when it feels heavy, when life gets loud, and your faith feels small, just remember this: God hasn't brought you this far to leave you now. The vision still stands. The promise still breathes. The best is not behind you. It's waiting right ahead of you. So keep your eyes on the vision. Keep your heart open to God's timing. And keep walking not by sight, but by faith. Because your next season will prove that every ounce of pain was something glorious in you. You were made for this. You were chosen for this. And no matter how dark it's been, you are stepping into the light of everything God promised. Keep your eyes on that vision and watch Him turn through into everything you've prayed for.